So today I'm going to be telling you the birth story of my firstborn, all natural, 8.5 hour birth. If you didn't have this, don't feel bad. I had 3 other births after that, and they were not like that at all. Let's get into it. So with my first, I had a pretty non-eventful pregnancy. She was pretty healthy. I didn't have much problems at all. I gained like 80 pounds. That was bad. I wish I hadn't done that. But I thought that every little pain you couldn't move around for and you had to like rest on the couch or something. So fast forward to when she was born. I had been taking ovulation tests previously to getting pregnant, so I thought I knew when my cycle was working and when her exact due date should be. I think I was misguided, but she did end up on the day I thought she was coming. So I had been trying for like a few weeks leading up to her birth to prepare my body for birth. I'd done the raspberry leaf tea, bouncing on my ball, the baby dancing to get the baby out the same way she got in, and none of that had been working. So I told the Lord, I said, please just let me go into labor on the morning I'm supposed to have her, at least the morning I thought I was supposed to have her, which it did work out that way. So the night before I gave birth, I was laying in bed. Around 2 in the morning, I started getting these light Braxton Hicks contractions. And I had gotten these before. Every time we did the baby dancing, TMI, they would cause me to do that. But this time, we hadn't done anything, and they were just happening. And so I thought to myself, I wonder if this could be it. We hadn't done anything to make these happen, so possibly. My husband was asleep next to me, and he had to work the next day. And I didn't want to wake him up for no reason. So I thought, I'm just going to lay here and rest and see what happens. I'm tired anyway. But then my husband decided to like blow his nose extremely loud. And I must have been pregnant and hormonal because it annoyed me. And I was like, if he's going to be over there waking me up, I'm going to wake him up. So that's what I did. I woke him up, and he was happy to get up. Um, we weren't really sure if it was actually labor, but I would do a few things during those next couple of hours. One thing I did is I got out my birthing ball, and I would get in deep squats every time I would have a contraction, pretty much, and it was just I would just use it to sit my back on and just squat, and I think it really did help. Also, I would go run to my bed, put my rear in the air, and just kind of like sit like that during a contraction, and it made it feel so much better for whatever reason. And so then I eventually got out the little tracker for contractions I had on my phone, the little app, and we're kind of watching them. And I don't know, I just didn't take it super serious yet at this point. But all of a sudden, I got this feeling like I needed to go to the hospital. I felt like something was telling me that. I think it was the Lord. And so I was like, yeah, maybe I should go to the hospital. So we called the hospital, and I talked to the nurse, and she's like, uh, you know, yeah, you sound a little breathless or something. Come in. And then I went to take my shower, and this is where it kind of hit me. I was in the shower for about 10 minutes, and I had 4 contractions. And so they were getting pretty close together. So we got our stuff, got in the car, and my husband, sweet husband that he is, he does not usually speed. And today he was very much following the speed limit. And I was like, we are not going to make it. It was about 45 minutes away. And so I don't know how my brain went from we're fine to like he should be rushing. But in the car, the contractions started to get very intense. And at this point, I was like, am I going to scream or am I going to try to be calm? Because I knew if I started screaming, it probably wouldn't be good for me. So I started singing, and I started trying to like be calm through the contractions as my husband very slowly drove the 45 minutes about to the hospital. We finally get there. We have to park in this parking garage and then walk to the hospital. And then from there, we have to walk in the hospital up to an elevator and then go up to the floor and walk to the maternity ward. So I was like, okay, getting these contractions as I'm walking along, trying to look at people that are looking at me and like just be normal because there's all these people in the hospital. So finally we get up to the labor and delivery, and the nurses see me coming in. They're like, oh yeah, you're the one we talked to on the phone. You sounded kind of breathless. And I'm just trying to be polite and kind to everyone. And I get back to my room, and I think the nurse wanted me to like come over and get monitored and hooked up, and I really wanted to bounce on my ball. I think she maybe thought I was a baby or something. She probably thought I was like barely in labor and why I was acting this way. But I was being kind. I just needed to bounce on my ball. And she's like, I think she said, you can't hold still, can you? So she's asking me all these questions and getting me checked in. And she asked me about an epidural. And I tell her, I don't think I want an epidural or something like that. And she says, you're going to want the epidural. And the way she said it just made me feel kind of like, ooh, she really thinks I can't handle this. which I understand. And later in my other 3 births, I'll tell you about another time, I did get epidurals, but this time I didn't want one, and it just made me feel like, you know, I didn't understand why she was like judging me about that. Anyway, she goes to check me, and she goes, so she says something like, "You're at a 7," or "You're at a 7 over 7," but she something like that. She goes, "You're at a 7. I don't think you're going to be needing the epidural." And so then I was like, "Oh, well, maybe she'll have a little understanding now." um, but so what I did was I didn't use the epidural. You're only there for about 4 hours, and I would go back and forth from the bathroom where there was a shower that I could have hot water sprayed on my back to the bed where I was holding on to the end of the bed and like, well, the top of the bed, and like my bottom was back and just kind of swaying, and that was what was helping so much. It was interesting because the lady that did us, how would you call it, birthing classes came in, and she ended up being the nurse that was there, and she was so helpful. Um, my husband kind of had a different vibe with her when we were doing the birthing classes. She was a little bit unprofessional in the way she was talking, but at the actual birth, she was super nice, and she helped us so much. And so I was going back and forth, and I remember getting on the bed and like swaying back and forth and thinking that these contractions were like trials. Like, if anybody that, like, the spiritual studies the Bible or whatever, you think about how like you're in the middle of a trial, it gets really bad before it gets better, right? So I was thinking about contractions. They go really bad and then they start to get better. And so I started praying, like, Lord, help me. And it just felt like at the top of my trial where the contraction was the worst, praying and asking the Lord for help and just feeling like He was coming and helping me, what was getting me through. And this lady that was my nurse, she started praying with me too. It was so sweet. I don't really know what her personal beliefs are about it, but she was so sweet to, like, encourage me in my beliefs, and just go with what I needed. And so I appreciated that so much. So back to the story. We were going back and forth. At one point, I went to the bathroom and there was blood, and I was like, there's blood. I was 22 at the time, so this was kind of new to me. I'd seen, some stuff about it, but the nurse is like, that's part of your bloody show. You're fine. And so I continued to go back and forth. And at one point, I remember feeling that there was like something coming out, like bulging. I just felt like something was coming out. I went back to the bed, and the nurse was like, maybe this is what we're waiting for. And they checked, and they said my water uh, sac was like bulging down there. And I was like, oh. They're like, do you want the nurse to pop your water? I'm like, no, I don't. I'm just going to keep going with this. But then I was sitting in the bed kind of like this, and I was trying everything. I reached a point where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And I was telling the nurse, I can't. And that's one thing she did say that annoyed me. She's like, never say can't. And I'm like, but I can't. And I really got to where I felt like my body was just going to disintegrate and explode. My husband later told me that I was pinching his side. I did not realize I was doing that, but it got really intense for a little bit. And I didn't realize, when you think you cannot have any more contractions, you can't go on, you're just going to disintegrate in a puff, is usually when the baby's about ready to come. I didn't know that though. So I was just trying to, do what I could. And I was like, yes, I think I do want her to pop my water, because I just needed something to change. So the midwife, she was actually a lady midwife. She came in and she was younger, and she went to look, and she's like, my water just popped right while she was checking. And as soon as my water popped, it was like real soon after that, she's like, there's a head. So my daughter was just like sitting right behind that water. And knowing from other births and other doctors, them letting me sit up and push her out made it so much easier. It was like she kind of glided out. And I continued to push when they said I could, until they said pause for like one little moment. And they said the cord was loosely around her neck. So they took that off. And then I think it was only like 6 minutes of pushing. But I feel like being like at this angle just helped tremendously for me. And they got her out of course, and they laid her on me, and I'll never forget the feel of like her skin touching my skin for the first time. And it's just, you have this baby, you're looking down, and these little eyes. My husband says she has red hair, which I have a touch of red in my hair. Used to have more of it. And he said something funny too. He's like, you pushed her out faster than the goats, which he was used to being around farm animals as a kid. So that kind of cracked everyone up. But it was just such a special moment. And I kind of felt like I could cry, but I didn't feel like I was crying, but I felt extremely protective of this little baby. And it just happened so fast. In my mind, I thought it was going to be like a day long thing. And so then after that, of course, I got to do the skin to skin, and it was just like I wanted to know where my baby was, what was going on with her. So it was so precious. I think they came in the room to weigh her and stuff. Just got to soak her in. And then my husband, he got to hold her. Then we called my dad, which we had told him about 6 in the morning that I was going into the hospital. So we're like, hey, you can come see the baby now if you want to. And my dad was like, I'm already here. I'm out here waiting in the car. So he had just been waiting in the car for that phone call. And so then he got to come in and meet her. And my mom had been at a camp with my little brother, and she drove to come meet her. And she thought that she would get there before the baby was born, but she was born. And so she got to come in and meet her. And then before that, we had started breastfeeding a little bit. That started our breastfeeding journey. Some things happened in the hospital later on I could make a separate video about that I didn't care for, but that was my birth with my first daughter. It was amazing and beautiful. Um, it was everything that I would have wanted. Going forward in my next 3 pregnancies, they were kind of a little bit nightmare births. Not as bad as they could have been, but definitely they were inductions for high blood pressure and got crazy. So I know sometimes people think when they have like a beautiful natural birth, it's something that they personally did. And I kind of was proud of my first birth, and I feel like you should be proud of your birth in some degree. But as I had other more complicated births, I realized it wasn't something that I did. I was just as much dedicated to the cause with my complicated births as I was with this very wonderful birth. And I realized that all births are amazing in their own way. All mamas are amazing. However, they have their babies when they're dedicated to, having these children. It's not like you can choose what happens. So sometimes the warriors are the ones that have it the hardest because they go through the most. So I feel like I want to be cautious and, you know, um, sensitive to other moms out there. So, however, your baby came into the world, if it was under a rainbow out in the forest, all natural, and you caught it yourself, that is wonderful. But if you had to have a C-section or an induction or however traumatically it happened, where you had no control, if it took you 5 days to have the baby with an induction, you are still amazing. Which I don't know if they let you go 5 days, but you're still amazing. So that was nothing I did, but it's more how I handled the situation that we can be proud of, like how you handle what situation you're given. Ultimately, it's mama's safety, baby safety that come first, and being like, I need it to be a particular way to feel empowered. That's not right because your baby comes first, you come first. And however you have your baby, that is powerful. And I understand, like, you can grieve the things you miss. I will probably never, ever get the experience of going into labor spontaneously again because my blood pressure acts up every time I'm pregnant and they usually induce me. And I really get sad about that. I would love to have like a spontaneous vaginal delivery when my body did what it needed to do. And I do grieve that in some aspects. But then I remind myself I don't get pregnant for the labor, even though I do enjoy things about labor. And when it's all natural, it feels more empowering. But I get pregnant to bring my baby home and love my baby. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed hearing my first baby's birth story. I had 3 more after that. So, if you'd like to hear their stories, then let me know. I would be happy to share them. And if you have a wonderful story or something about your birth story you'd love to share in the comments, I would love to hear it. I think it's kind of like our war stories as women, how we overcame and got through these. And so, yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you another time.